surprise to you, but I put together this webinar, or I should say my team put together this webinar um, as an attempt to help me answer interactively more people's questions. I get, I've been on a lot of podcasts, which is a one-sided conversation over the last 10 days or so. I've been on a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zooms and things like that. And this is just sort of what my attempt to consolidate what I know for anybody who wants to listen, what I know and what I think. So I'll first start off with, saying that I'm not, I'm not an immunologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist. I'm a physician. I'm a former military physician. I'm a former SEAL. I've seen and been through some bad things and some emergent situations. And I understand, like I'm educated enough to understand the basic concepts of most of the math and statistics is being thrown around out there. So I just want to offer, again, this isn't medical advice and I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do. I just wanted to offer a different narrative. And what I mean by narrative is, what we hear, what we see, what we sense, the information that we bring in from the world. There's a process for getting that into our brain, but the more important aspect of that is what our brain does with it afterwards. So, there's a chemical reaction when light goes in your eyes, but then that doesn't actually make your brain see anything. It goes to your brain. Your brain has to interpret what that means. And so the same is true for everything else, and that includes information and statistics. And my entire life, I've been frustrated with media and advertisements presentation of statistics, because they often don't give statistics. They give the numerator, they give the number on top, they give the part, they don't give the part over the whole. For example, if I tell you there were 100 deaths last night, what can you really make out of that? Well, that's likely 100 unfortunate situations that we wish hadn't have happened, but 100 out of how many? And 100 compared to what? So if there were 100 deaths total last night, and usually, I don't know, 10,000 people die over 24 hours, something like that. I don't know. It's 3 to 4 million per month, whatever that works out to be. Then, if normally 10,000 die and only 100 die, well, that's a really good thing, right? Normally nobody dies, and we're talking about 100 people out of 102 people that were in a building or something. All right, right. So it's all relative to what. And so everything that I'm going to suggest today when I'm talking about the narrative is like, let's compare this to something else. Let's not use these numbers in isolation, and let's talk about the reality of how accurate these numbers are and what we know right now and what we don't know. The unfortunate truth is there is a lot more that we don't know than what we do know. All right. So when we start throwing around, all of these statistics, when we start talking about how many new cases are there, well, what does it mean to be a new case? We'll talk about that. How many deaths are there? How many serious and critical cases are there? How many are there worldwide? How many are they in each city? Like all of these matter, right? How many are they in the United States versus worldwide? And so the interpretations of those numbers lead to other assumptions. And those assumptions are then plugged into a model, a mathematical model that says, well, it appears that as I interpret the data that currently exists, it appears that this is going this way, that we can expect this many per you choose the denominator. Like we have a numerator, which we can measure, something like deaths. We can definitely measure how many deaths are there. And we'll expand on that a little bit too, but we can measure deaths. Can we measure the absolute cases? Absolutely not. There's no way unless we tested every single person at the exact same time of their disease, or because you could have already had this disorder, you could have already had this infection and it be gone, We aren't currently testing for that as far as I know, but we will be. So if we were doing the PCR test that we're using to diagnose and it's already come and gone, you're going to show up as negative even though you've already had it. And maybe if you just got it and you don't have a high enough viral load, there's not enough DNA for it, or RNA for it to amplify and test for, well, then you're not going to show that you have it then either. And so, unless, I'm just pulling numbers out and making it up, but the only way to know the absolute number is to test every single person in America and to test them all on day 5. Like, I'm just making that up, but like day 5 is like the day that we know it'll be positive if you actually have it. And then we could say, well, that's the absolute number of cases. And then how many people died? This is all going to be historical. We're only going to know historically. We have to look back on this. Now, there's another complication when if we were to do that, if we tested every single person and we could test every single person 5 days after, 5 days after they had contracted it, and we knew that that was a positive, there would still be false positive. There would still be false negatives, right? So a false positive is, it says you have it and you don't. A false negative is it says you don't have it, but you do. But there's also an or, right? So there's also the possibility that that you have this virus and you have something else, right? And you have influenza and you have some bacterial infection causing your pneumonia and there's lots of things that could be and then and from what I've researched, and I'll pull up the page here in a second, from what I've researched, it looks to me like there's also a big or. So it looks like that SARS-1 and this is now SARS-2, both being coronaviruses, both being novel coronaviruses. The coronavirus from it's H1N1, right? The swine flu. So that coronavirus and this coronavirus share very similar genetic material. And I can't tell with 100% certainty, so I don't want to state this as a fact, but this is pretty common with laboratory tests that we could be saying you could have this or that. And so we're presuming that out of those two, we want to be extra careful that you don't have the CoV-2. And so we're going to call that a positive test. Now, like I said, there's still the possibility, and the CDC's website even says this, that just because you test somebody with this, that does not mean that the symptoms you're seeing have been caused from this. We're just saying what's probable, what's possible, and what do we want to guard against. So with that, let's talk about, this might be a little backwards. Let's talk about what does it mean to have a viral infection? What is a virus? And I think the reason I'm going to talk about this is because I want to talk about the interpretation of the models that are being projected. And the reason I want to talk about that is I think there's some logical fallacies and sort of doomsday type stuff we're doomsday information we're getting, or doomsday proposals or visions or projections or whatever you want to call them. So a coronavirus, so viruses fall into something that we call families, right? And there's other subcategories of it, but we're going to keep it simple. And coronavirus is a family. And this family of viruses tend to infect mammals and birds and in the world. And we obviously have our own viral infections that tend to affect humans. And coronavirus is one of them, right? There's several coronaviruses, like the common cold is a coronavirus. So a virus is simply, it's a ball, right? So you've seen probably the pictures at this point. It's a ball. It has some things sticking up off of the ball. So it's kind of like a spiky ball. Inside of the ball is genetic material. And that ball floats around. If it gets, so your first line of defense, keep in mind, first line of defense is your skin. Viruses can't get into your skin. Viruses can get into your mouth and your nose and your eyes because that's not your skin. So if they can get into that area, they can get into your bloodstream, they can attach themselves to cells, And then they get inside of that cell, they break open, and they release their genetic material into your genetic material. And it changes how your genetic material is read. And then it takes that cell, let's say that it's a liver cell, and this virus attaches to it, and it changes the genetic expression of the nucleus, of the genes, the DNA inside of that liver cell. And it says, hey, start doing this instead of what you were doing. And this that we want you to start doing, that's making more of these viruses. And then those viruses keep expanding to where there's so much that it ruptures out into, that cell dies and ruptures out and releases thousands or billions, I don't know the scale of it, but it releases a lot more viruses into the bloodstream, and then those can all attach to cells. And then this ramps up and ramps up and ramps up. And if your immune system can't fight this, then you could see how very quickly it would cause an exponential growth of dying cells in your body, and also an exponential growth of the viruses. That's a viral infection. So your immune system is really important, and we're going to talk about that. Your immune system protects you from what's inside of your body, right? And then we'll also talk in a minute about your stress hormones, right? The fight or flight, people have talked about cortisol, stress hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol. These are the primary stress hormones. And these defend you against what's outside of your body, right? So this takes care of an external threat. Once it gets inside of you, it's the immune system is fighting off an internal threat. So the reason I talk about the families is because the entire purpose of exchange of genetic material in this world is to try to promulgate or perpetuate or what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, I just washed my face. I'm going to do that a lot, but I just wash my hands like 100 times. So we want to keep reproducing and proliferating and populating the world with our genetic material, right? This is the concept of spores and pollen, and pollen with bees, and nuts and seeds, and viruses and bacterium, and animal species that procreate. And so a family starts with some pair that's able to exchange genetic material. So talk about animal kingdom, it's a male and a female. They can basically exchange genetic material, and then they create another type of human that doesn't have the same genetic material as either one of them, but parts of both of them, and then that spreads out, and that's a family. Well, if you're a virus, and this is all anthropomorphism, which, like, I'm giving sort of person-like traits to and motives and thinking and so forth. I'm going to talk about viruses like they had that. They don't, obviously, viruses aren't even alive. They're just a ball with genetic information in there that affect other living things. And so if the virus's intent was to spread its genetic material across as much of the world as possible, and we just presume that's true because that seems to be kind of the way life and life-like things work. If that were true, then if the virus immediately killed whatever host it went into, or very quickly killed whatever host it went into, it wouldn't have much time to replicate, and it wouldn't have much time to perpetuate its genetic material. So the odds that a virus is going to come in and really quickly kill a host, and it's not because the virus understands this or has some benevolent intent, it's just the mechanics of it. If it's so virulent, meaning so powerful that it kills animals instantaneously, well, then it's not going to live very long. So we don't know exactly where this coronavirus came from. It doesn't seem to be mutating very much, which the mutation is primarily talking about the genetic material inside of that. Is it changing? Therefore, do we know what it's likely to do, and do we know what's likely to interfere with it doing what it wants to do? That's based a lot on the genetic material that's in it, because that's how we target things when we're talking about viruses. And so if you have if you have this viral infection that's trying to spread its own DNA or its own RNA across the world, and it kills the host immediately, it won't work. And if the host is able to fight it off really quickly, and not get sick and not have a bunch of cells ruptures and not cough and sneeze and hack this material out, well, then it dies off too. So every virus is kind of right in between that, right? So the reason I talk about that is because there's a lot of concern about how transmissible is this? How contagious is this? What's the R naught? How many people will one person infect? Of course, that varies greatly. If I'm one person and I live on 100 acres in the middle of Texas, or if I'm one person and I live in New York City, like that's drastically different, but we take an average across that. So we need really big numbers for epidemiology and mathematical modeling to work. And my contention is that we don't have really big numbers yet. We don't have big enough numbers to know what's going on. And I think there are a lot of academics who agree with me on this. And again, I don't specialize in this area. This is my personal opinion. So let's talk about the death rate real quickly. So there are a couple of things when we're testing people. First of all, like I said, false positive, false negatives, you may have it, but that's not the cause of your disease, or you may have it and you have something else, or you may have it or you have something else. And either way, you may die. So it's a little complex, but let's just, for simplicity, let's just say that every test is accurate. And so there are two numbers that we want to know when we're testing. One is the incidence. The incidence means how many new cases over whatever period. So let's call it per day. How many new cases per day? That's the incidence. That's how many people are developing it. So how many people are getting infected by it. And then the prevalence is how many people have it. How many people do we know have it? So for instance, the prevalence of worldwide of COVID-19, or not COVID-19, that's the disease. It's SARS-CoV-2. The incidence of that is, I think, 522, 500, and I tell you what, I'm going to look it up right now. I don't want to give you a false number. Just 510,000 cases. I haven't refreshed this in a few minutes, so maybe I'm a little off. But so that's the prevalence. There's 510,000 cases. 122,000 people have recovered. So we have 365,000 current cases. So because China's had 80,000 people with only like 1,500 left that still have the disease or something. So, they're monitoring. So there's a difference between the prevalence and the incidence. So the prevalence is how many people worldwide have it. We will never, ever come close to knowing that number. How many people are currently getting it? We can get closer, but we're still going to be really far off. And the reasons, there's multiple reasons for that. So one of the big things to think about is that testing, there's decision-making processes before we test. So there's no guarantee that China had the same criteria for testing that we have, had the same criteria for how they collect it, for how they test it, for the training of their technicians that are doing the test, for the reagents they're using. There could be, and I'm not going to dig into how much of this exists, but there could be, it's very likely, that there could be significant differences in how they're choosing to test people, what symptoms, how severe does it have to be before they test you, where are they collecting it from, how are they handling it, what reagents are they using, how are they interpreting it, what other comorbidities do their populations tend to have. So we're never going to know the exact number. And that's actually just the way it is across, all testing that we've ever done. We're never going to know the exact number. But that's really important to think about, right? Because if the number of people who have it is 10-fold higher, then the death rate is 10-fold lower. If it's 100-fold higher, then the death rate's 100-fold lower. And so everybody's saying, well, why don't we just test everybody in America? We could do that. And unquestionably, what we would then find is that it has the lowest death rate of almost any virus we've ever studied. And why is that? Because we've never tested that many people for the disease before, and so we've never come close to capturing the number of positives that we captured on this. So now we've kind of made old, influenza-like illnesses, pneumonias, respiratory disease. Like we've kind of made all those old data useless, or we just don't know what to do with our current data. So we could get a lot of confidence and say, oh, the incidence or the prevalence is 100 times more than we thought. So that means the death rate's 100 times lower. And so we're not as afraid of this because there's only 1/10 of influenza. Well, if we tested everyone in America for influenza and then we had the real death rate for that, then maybe it would be lower than this one. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things that we can't take action on right now. And in the absence of not being able to take action, the uncertainty causes fear. We are wired as human beings, as like our species, we're wired to pay particular attention to things that are dangerous. Many of you have probably heard of the amygdala, these two little kind of walnut size or walnut shaped things on in your brain that cause you to pay attention to dangerous things. So right now, there are dangerous things in the world. There are things that could possibly kill you. Those things are a myriad of those things, right? You can die from heart disease. You can die from cancer. You can die from pneumonia. You can die from automobile accidents. You can die from work-related accidents. You can die from violent crime. Like there's all sorts of things you can die from, and there's a basal rate. And this is where it gets important into talking about the narrative. And you could just call this the spin. I don't like spin because it sounds manipulative. Narrative is simply my interpretation of it, but use whatever you feel comfortable with. So if we think about this and you say, what does it mean that X number of people have this, and what is that likely to mean in the future? And that's kind of where the spin's coming from. Like I said, there's a lot of assumptions in there, and there's a lack of denominator in a lot of those things. So if I look out in the world and I say, what's the most likely thing to kill me? It's not COVID-19, not even close. What's the most likely thing to kill my 70-year-old mother? Also not COVID-19. Now, I'm not saying we blow it off. I'm not saying that we say it doesn't matter. I'm saying that we need to put it in perspective. I am orders of magnitude more likely to have a heart attack, even in my age, than I am to die of COVID. My mother is orders of magnitude more likely to die of cancer or heart attack or stroke or a myriad of other things. Even a respiratory illness, she's more likely to die of pneumonia or other forms of pneumonia, bacterial or other viral forms of that. Again, I'm not saying that means we don't do anything. I'm just saying your amygdala, your system that causes you to focus on what's dangerous, will hyper-focus on what you consider to be the most dangerous thing, right? So, for instance, 2,000 years ago, if you're walking around and you see an orange, black, and white stripe pattern, that's a tiger, that causes a lot of fear. You go into fight or flight, your amygdala says, wow, that's super dangerous. We need to get away from here. And your stress hormones go to an absolute maximum. And when that happens, that's called fight or flight. And really good things happen when you're in fight or flight. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases, your pupils dilate, you get a wider field of vision, you take in more light, your lungs dilate, take in more oxygen. You start mobilizing stored glucose, which is called glycogen. You start mobilizing that and enhancing, improving, and increasing your blood glucose levels. Your pain threshold goes up. Your reflexes get sharper and faster. Your strength goes up. Your endurance goes up because you are fighting or fleeing. So you're sort of a superhuman version of you, like you're the most optimal version of you to get away from that threat. Now, there are lots of things that aren't happening during that, right? You aren't digesting food, you aren't thinking rational thoughts, you aren't emotionally categorizing things, you aren't problem solving. It's all impulsive. If you've ever been in a fight or flight situation, a near car wreck, a physical attack, a fist fight, a gunfight, any of this stuff, you've been in these types of environments. You know there's not a lot of rational thought, there's no problem solving, there's no introspection. Your brain isn't working that great. Your digestion isn't working, your reproductive system isn't working, and your immune system isn't working. And your immune system isn't working because it just doesn't matter. If your immune system doesn't work and the lion or tiger gets you, it doesn't matter. If you get away and your stress hormones come down, then your immune system can come back and it can solve whatever problems it was dealing with. Now, the exact opposite of that is what we call deep sleep, slow wave sleep. And, there's different stages of sleep, but I'll just call it deep sleep to be simple right now. Deep sleep is the exact opposite, meaning that your cortisol, your stress hormones are the lowest they're ever going to be. And while they're the lowest they're ever going to be, everything that happens during fight or flight, all of that blood pressure and pupil dilation and breath and strength, like all that doesn't happen in your sleep. You don't need that. But your reproductive system's cranking, your digestion's cranking, your hormones are all being reset, you're getting rid of waste products, you're repairing damaged tissues, and you're fighting off infections. Viral, bacterial, parasitic, doesn't matter. You're fighting things off. So when you're fighting things off, your chances of not getting super sick and not dying from something that's gotten inside of you, right? We're no longer worried about the outside threats. What's inside of us is their threat. Their best chance of not dying from what's inside of us is to have a strong immune system. So let's talk about what it means to have a strong immune system. Well, first let's talk about the reaction to what's going on. I'm going to share my screen really quickly here. If I can figure out how to do that. There we go. I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go here. Okay. It didn't go there. All right. So this is World O Meters. I highly recommend this for anybody who's interested. What I will recommend sort of as a whole to spin your narrative, however you want to say that, is anytime you hear any sort of statistic, go to World O Meter. Oh, okay, so it is on the right one. So why is it different on mine than that one? Okay, so this is what we're supposed to be dealing with now. Where are we? I don't know how we got there. All right, so anyway, if you can you help me here, Charles? Yeah. Like there has to be, this is obviously coming from my computer. Oh, here it is, never mind, I got it. Okay, my computer doesn't want to share with you completely. It doesn't trust anyone on here. All right, so this is a pandemic response. This is written by the CDC. These are the plans that we have for these exact types of things. And if you look at category 1, category 2, category 3, 4, this is the expected number of deaths over here. So category 1 is we have fewer than 90,000 deaths. Over here, as you see, as we talked about, we have the case fatality ratio. That's another way of saying the death rate, right? Again, without knowing the true denominator, we don't truly know. But if you look at the categories here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, look at the death tolls that are required to be this category. So over almost 2 million people here, 1 to 2 million people here, 500,000 to 1 million, 100,000 to 450,000, and then 90,000, fewer than 90,000. Now, to give you an example, somewhere between 20 and 60,000 people die from the flu every year. So that would all be category 1 at its worst. And here's what we talk about. If we hit one of these categories of pandemic, we've called this a pandemic. The policymakers have called this a pandemic. The elected officials are calling this a pandemic. And the scientists and doctors in charge of controlling this, they're calling it a pandemic. What category are we in? Well, the only way we can know that is by looking at all these things over here. What do we do when the pandemic hits? Well, we isolate all the ill people. We recommend that, we recommend that, we recommend that, no matter what phase you're in. We voluntarily quarantine households if there's one ill person in there. Not recommended generally in 1, consider it in 2 and 3, and we recommend it in 4 and 5. Closing schools, generally not recommended, consider it, but less than 4 weeks, recommended that. Let's go there. workplace changes. Are we changing the schedule? Are we changing how people work, how close they are together, personal protective equipment, all of that other stuff? Again, category 1, we're not really recommending it. 2 and 3, we're considering it. 4 and 5. The point of all this is that we're actually responding as though we're in 4 or 5. This is the way we're behaving. So anybody who says we're not doing enough is being foolish. We are doing enough. We're doing what we can do. And that's the point of the narrative. My screen's not even switching around anymore. So I'm going to stop share. Okay. So we are doing enough. We are doing what we can do. So let me see if I can tie this together. I didn't really plan all this out. I was just kind of threw this idea together. And so I don't have a script for this. Let me see if I can tie it all together. So when we look at the threat of this, we need to compare it to what? I recommend not putting too much weight on how many cases we're finding. A more important number, if we want to share this screen, a more important number would be, let's talk about, no, that's the wrong one. Let's talk about right. Let's talk about the total deaths. Let's talk about how many are mild, how many are serious or critical, how many are recovered, and how many people have died. And then we can go down here, and the beauty of this is a great site. You can organize it by country, you can organize it by total cases. As you can see, China has the highest, Italy has the next, USA has the 3rd highest. But let's look at total deaths. USA actually has the 6th highest, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. More importantly, how many active cases, how many serious cases do we have? So let's organize this by serious cases. 3,600 in Italy, 3,100 in Spain, 2,800 in France, Iran, USA 2,000. That's not insignificant. I'm not saying we shouldn't care. But when we hear that New York City itself wants 40,000 respirators and we only have 2,000 serious or critical cases, that's because we're projecting that these numbers are going to get a lot bigger, which is based on assumptions and based on things that we don't know for sure. Again, not telling you anybody's wrong. I'm just saying there are other ways to interpret it, and there are reasons for your own personal sanity to not go too quickly into dire concerns of all this stuff. So here we are. I'm gonna tie this together. I'm gonna stop sharing this right now. Oh, if you want to look this side up, this is the CDC's guidance for healthcare providers on how we do the test. And it talks about the test and the limitations of the test. And if you want to look that up, I recommend doing your own research. And here is the guidance sheet. I'll cover that at the end. So we're going to wrap it. We're going to try again to wrap it up and not digress. So we don't truly know what the incidence is. We won't truly know what the prevalence is. If we look back at the end of the summer, by next flu season start or something like that, we will have a better idea, but we're never going to know exactly. What we will know is the total death rate. Again, we don't know that all of those people who died, who had a positive test, actually died from COVID. And we don't know that they wouldn't have died from influenza A or influenza B or other type of pneumonia. They might have just been susceptible during this season and they were going to die anyway. And again, that doesn't make it better. I'm not saying people should die or we should give up on folks. What I'm saying is that at some point, we've done everything that we can do as a society and people are still going to die. And so if we're using our amygdala, if we're talking about our fight or flight, our stress and our ability to fight off things, what's against it, and the immunity, then we have to think about how all of this comes together, right? So we have to think about our amygdala going, well, the only thing that matters is coronavirus. Well, I did some math earlier. I don't know exactly where it is. But if you look at the total number of people who have died during this pandemic worldwide, it ends up being, I want to say, about 0.01% of all the deaths since, I think, December. I used all the deaths since December to date. 0.01% of all deaths were caused by coronavirus. And again, that could be wrong because we don't know we don't know that they actually died from coronavirus because they had coronavirus, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt, 0.01%. The important part about that is you have a 99.99% of dying of something else. So don't let your worry, don't let your concerns get rid of all of the other threats, right? All of the other threats, cancer, heart disease, stroke, automobile accidents, work-related accidents, violent crimes, suicide, all sorts of things can kill us. Other bacterial and viral infections can kill us. There's all sorts of things that can kill us, and we can't just pay attention to one thing. As a society, we have agreed to certain social contracts. And one of those social contracts is that we are going to do everything we can around this area to stop deaths to a certain degree. And I know this is an unpopular parallel, and I'm not using it to be glib, I'm using it to be succinct. If we think about automobiles, 33,000 people die per year in traffic accidents in the United States. About 30 some odd thousand die on average with influenza in the flu season as well. And that's just influenza. That's not all infectious respiratory diseases. And we do what we can to stop people from dying. We build safer cars. We crash test cars. There's federal regulations on how safe your car has to be. You have to wear a seatbelt. You have to have, well, you don't have to have, but I think, airbags are becoming more and more common. You're supposed to drive a certain speed. You pay attention to road signs. You pay attention to traffic signs. You don't text and drive. You don't drink and drive. You don't talk on your phone and drive. You don't juggle and drive. There's all sorts of things that you don't do. And even if we do all of those things, 33,000 people die every year. Again, not being glib. It's very tragic that we've had 2,000, 2,100 deaths in America. No, we're not that high. 1,100 deaths in America. It's tragic. Of course, I don't want anyone to die. I'm not advocating for that. But if we said, you know what, we are accepting 0 deaths from automobile accidents, we can no longer drive cars. If we say we're accepting 0 deaths from influenza, we can't stop it. We're not going to get 0, and we're not going to get 0 coronavirus. And I have a theory, a postulate. This is totally my narrative. I have no reason for this. Is just a logical, well, to me, it's a logical assumption. So if we look at the total area under a curve, so this is my curve. That's a bell curve, right? And underneath that curve, there are people that are representing the height of that curve, right? And it's peaking right around here, and it's dying off. If this is time, we're starting, we're growing, people are dying. Now, if we call this influenza-like illness, we could put coronavirus in there. And this curve, when we call it influenza-like illness, that's the number that's like, 33,000, say. It could be influenza A, which there's various subtypes. It could be influenza B. It could be other things, but let's say it's one of the influenza strands that's killing people. Well, during that peak, it could be 100% one virus, 0 of another. It could be thirds, it could be fifths, however many make that up. We could add coronavirus to that, and it could be that everybody who fits in this curve are elderly, immunosuppressed, whatever, they are more susceptible to that than the rest of us. And influenza, one of the influenzas, or maybe even the coronavirus, is going to kill them. Again, I'm not being flippant about that. I'm just saying that the area under the curve might not change. We might end up a year from now looking back and saying this was the kind of the exact same number that ordinarily dies from a flu season. It wasn't even a super bad flu season. It was like on the worst side of things, but it's scary because it's new and we don't know enough about it. We don't know how to protect against it. But I just showed you whether you're in category 1 through 5, the protections are the same thing, and it's the same thing that we're already doing. And we're doing this to prevent influenza deaths, and we're also doing this to prevent coronavirus deaths. But more people, many more people are dying from influenza right now. So your odds of dying from this, your odds of people you love and care about dying from this, exceedingly low. exceedingly low. All of the deaths in America, if you break that down in percentage, everybody who's died, go to Worldometer, look that up. There's hours and hours of geeky data in there. You can go through there and you can find your denominator and you say, what percentage over the course of this period of time, how many people have died, period? How many people have died from infectious disease, period? How many people have died from influenza-like illness? How many people have died from pneumonias? How many people have died from respiratory disease? And you can choose whatever denominator you want. And then what percentage of that, hey, Charles, he's in the backyard. Sorry, we have a package being picked up. When you find your denominator, what portion of people relative to what? Coronavirus has killed how many people relative to what? We probably don't have nearly as many people dying from car accidents right now because of what we're doing. We probably don't have nearly as many occupational deaths because of what we're doing. So that means we could actually be at a net positive. We could have had fewer people die in the last month than we would have had if everybody were back to work and we didn't have coronavirus. Again, I'm not saying pick your nose and fling it at people. I'm not saying blow it up. I'm not saying tell your community to stuff it. Be a responsible citizen. Don't drink and drive. Wear your seatbelt. Wash your hands. Don't cough on people. This is social responsibility. There are lots of things that are dangerous too, and you're only focusing on one if you're panicked about this. And it's not likely to be the most important thing for you to focus on. It could be. I could be totally wrong. This could end up being the worst pandemic ever. But what the data shows right now, the absolute death rate and the critical cases that we currently have, it does not warrant, in my opinion, it does not warrant this being the focus of your life. So let's talk about what you can do if this were to be the worst pandemic ever. What's your best chance of survival? Well, we've already alluded to it. Your best chance of survival and your loved one's best chance of survival is that we take the socially responsible actions to distance ourselves from people, to not cough on people, to not get our sputum, our saliva, our bodily fluids on people or take others people's onto us, that we disinfect areas and we wash our hands. And we do everything that we can to a reasonable extent. The extreme would be every single person in America gets put in a box until this whole thing is over, but I don't know how that could ever happen. We'd never be able to test because everybody would be in their own box. I don't mean to be glib about that. I'm just saying, let's talk about the extreme. The other extreme is just say, this is a bunch of BS. We're going to do whatever we want. Somewhere in the middle, right? It's neither one of those things. So whatever policies that come out, I don't make policies. I'm not telling you to object policies. I'm not suggesting policies. What I'm saying is we live in a very capable country. We have the #1 country for responding to medical disasters and emergencies. We have a fantastic military with fantastic medical capabilities. If you think about the world wars, if you think about wars in general, if you think about the stuff that the military can do, they can set up field hospitals so quickly. I mean, you get the Army Corps of Engineers, you get the Navy Seabees, you get these people and they just build these things almost immediately. We have all sorts of stockpiles of equipment. We are nowhere near our potential right now. We may be near our basal rate, but let's think about it. If we were at war and people were bombing and shooting people in New York City, we wouldn't be able to keep up with the hospitals there either. What would we do? We would put up field hospitals and we'd handle it there. We would ship people out. The same thing can happen. We can put up emergency hospitals in places. We can put up emergency cares. We can do different kinds of testing. We can take the patients to other areas. If no one in the Midwest is having any problems, we could fly people there. There's all sorts of things that we can do to prevent this. We're not even scratching the surface of what we could do. So don't let this be bigger than it is. What you can do is all the reasonable things, all the policy things that are out there right now, do your best to abide with all of those things. Nobody's going to be perfect. These things are behavioral changes. They take time. They take practice. Now, there's another side of this. There's another personal responsibility you have that nobody's talking about. And that personal responsibility is taking care of yourself. Because I just told you how a virus works and how it proliferates and how it gets out of you into other people. Well, the better your immune system, the less likely you are to have a viral overload that makes you so symptomatic that you give it to somebody else. You're also less likely to become a patient. You're also less likely to use up a respirator that somebody else could have saved somebody else's life if your immune system were better. So the good news is all you have to do is what I've been telling you to do for 10 years. Exercise, eat well, control your stress, and sleep well. The bucket that holds all of that is sleep. Because of what I told you, deep sleep, that's your highest immune function. Not only that, that controls your stress hormones. What wakes you up in the morning without an alarm clock is an adequate amount of stress hormones. What keeps you alert in proportion to your environment. So if you're laying on your couch, your stress hormones are not the same as if you're racing a car. What keeps you alert in proportion to your environment is stress hormones. Stress hormones have to go back down to a level lower than what woke you up for you to be able to go to sleep. They have to get down really low. The lower they get, the better your immune system is functioning during the night. They gradually come back up. The next day, you can have lower stress hormones than you had today because you got a really good night's sleep. Conversely, if you don't get a good night's sleep, the whole purpose of sleep is to get your brain and body ready for tomorrow. If you don't sleep enough, you still have to do tomorrow. So we've signed this contract as a species that says we need 8 hours to get ready to be the most prepared, the most optimized I can possibly be for tomorrow is after I've gotten 8 hours of sleep. Okay, what if I only sleep 6 hours? Then I lost 25% of the effect. I'm 25% worse, and I'm 25% more dangerous to my community. I'm not being a good citizen. I'm not being a good community member. I need to take care of myself. I need to get good sleep. Well, if I'm worried, if my amygdala is hyper-focused on all these ridiculous, denominatorless headlines in the media talking about how this is going to end humanity, and you're stressed out of your mind because you don't know any better. You don't do this for a living. I don't do this for a living. Like, how do we know? We got to do hours and hours of research to find out if it's even true. And by the time we do that, 500 other headlines have come out. There's all this doom and gloom. It's very unlikely we're getting 2 to 4 to 6 million deaths that they're talking about. Worldwide, we have 22,000 deaths. You're telling me America, 5% of the population? 5% of the population of the world is America, and we're going to have millions of deaths while the whole world has tens of thousands? Doesn't seem likely. Possible. That's modeling. It's making assumptions. But if that's what you're focused on, your stress hormones are going to be higher because there's a threat. Here's the problem. You're making that threat really big, or you're listening to people who are making that threat really big, and you can't change what you do. You don't have any defense against it. All you can do is what you're already doing. And you're still much, much, much more likely to die from other causes than you are from this. So be socially responsible and do the right things. Be socially responsible. Wash your hands. Don't cough on people. Sanitize. Disinfect. Get good sleep. Get plenty of sleep, right? The other thing is exercise, nutrition. If I eat food, remember, I've put something into my body now. My cortisol can no longer help me. My fight or flight doesn't help me. My immune system helps me. If I put something in my body that wants to take over cells of my body and cause me harm. If I eat foods that have what's called antigens in them that can irritate the linings of my GI tract and cause an immune response, and I'm eating pizza and drinking beer all day and I'm not taking care of myself, well, that is causing an immune response to what I'm eating. So let's say it takes 15% of my immune system. I've marshaled all of that 15% over to deal with the food I just ate. Well, that's 15% less effective than my immune system is if I have to fight off the virus, right? So why would I decrease my immune system by eating bad food? Why would I decrease my immune system by not sleeping well? I'm risking myself, but I'm also risking my community. Exercise. Well, if I don't exercise, my immune system isn't as good. And there's reasons for that. There's dozens of reasons for that I won't go into. Some very simple things. It increases lymphatic flow. That's kind of where that's sort of like the highways of the immune system. Certain parts of the immune system flow through that. It changes how much oxygen, it changes how much red blood cells, how much nourishment gets to distant areas of our bodies, and what areas of our bodies get the most blood flow. All of these things affect our immunity. It affects us being the best us we could possibly be. Me being the optimal Kirk, to not get sick myself and to not make somebody else sick, requires me to do the right things, the things that we know to do. And then the fourth thing is to control your stress. And I just told you, if you don't sleep well, you wake up with more stress hormones. The closer your stress hormones are to fight or flight, the worse your immune system is. The closer your immune system is to the way it works during fight or flight, which is to say not much at all. So if I don't sleep enough, I wake up with more stress hormones. If I'm worried all day and I'm doomsdaying this all day, I have higher stress hormones, and it's going to be very hard for me to get my stress hormones low enough to get good sleep. And even if I do get to sleep, I may not get as low of stress hormones as I could have gotten, and so I don't have the immune system. So the good news is we're just doing the same thing I've always said to do. It's no different, and it's not specific to me, right? Anyone who's in a health-related, health coaching kind of optimization thing, they're all talking about the same things. It's how you eat, it's how you sleep, it's how you control your stress, and it's how you exercise. And exercise can be simply activity. If you don't usually exercise, now is not the time to start running 10 miles a day or something. You're going to overstress your body, cause too much stress hormones, and interfere with your immune system. Now is the time to at least maintain your activity level up and maybe increase it. If you don't exercise at all, mow your lawn. If you live in certain areas, shovel snow. If you live in other areas, wash your own car, clean your house. Like, I don't know, do some light exercise, go on a walk, go on a bicycle ride. I know people can't go to the gym, but come on, we haven't had gyms for 200,000 years out of the 200,100 years is 200 years that we've had gyms. You can still be active. Like, you can pick up rocks in your backyard, you can walk up and down steps, you can do push-ups. Like, come on, we can be active. So be active, eat well, control your stress. One of the best ways to control your stress is something called mindfulness. What we've been talking about here is narrative and cognitive behavioral therapy and mindset, right? It's how are you interpreting this data? Go find the denominators. Compared to what? Everything that you hear, compared to what? That's what matters. Compare it to something relevant. Put it in proportion to every other threat in your life. Control your narrative. Mindfulness can be breath work. It can be visualization. It can be meditation. It can be something as simple as using your non-dominant hand to do everything during the day, because it causes you to pay attention to right now. If you're paying attention to right now, you're not worried about the future. Thinking about the future leads to anxiety. Thinking about the past leads to depression. You need to think about the now. Control your stress, meditate, relax, breathe, get some activity in, eat good food, have a good time with the people you can interact with, even if it's over Zoom or Skype or whatever, but have a sense of community. Work hard for something better and higher and bigger than yourself. We as humans will do quite a bit to maintain our own health and to try to reach the future we've envisioned for ourselves, but we will do more for other people. This is part of the human condition. You will do more for your kids, for instance, than you'll do for yourself. As a community, if you can think about, well, I don't really want to do this, but it's better for other people, it's better for the community, it's better for society, it's better for the outlook of this disease and pandemic that we're in, if I do the things that I know I should be doing. That's all I've got. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit? There were some specific questions about supplements, and I know that you had a general thought on.
Wipe my face.
People were asking about
supplements,
about vitamin C, about garlic, about ginger.
Okay, so there is an overwhelming number of supplements that are being recommended to be immune boosting. My recommendations here is, if you are not idealized in your exercise, sleep, nutrition, and stress control, mindfulness, whatever you want to call that fourth pillar, if you haven't optimized those, you're missing the boat with supplementations. Supplementations are supplemental. You live your life as close to ideal as possible. It's not possible to live ideally. And then you supplement on top of that. Taking certain vitamins help if you are deficient in that vitamin. But many things are benign. Liposomal vitamin C, does that help? Possibly. There's some science to suggest it might. We don't know. Can't hurt. But if you're not sleeping well, you've decreased your immune system 30%. Liposomal vitamin C might increase your immune system 1%. Vitamin D3 has been argued about, right? It could make things worse. It could make things better. Curcumin argued about both ways. I don't know. Nobody knows right now. We don't know enough about this virus. It could be that this virus totally feeds off of garlic and it's the best thing in the world for it. Being glib. It's very unlikely. But the point is we don't know. So there are some baseline immune boosting, immune sustaining things like glutathione, like vitamin C, like vitamin D3, fish oils. There are lots of things that you can do. You don't need to, I wouldn't go for anything, exotic that you've never heard of before, but there's kind of like a baseline of things that have reasonable, there's some reason to believe that they could work. They're very unlikely to harm you. Make sure you're not taking ridiculous dosages of things. But the lifestyle is the 99% solution. The supplements are the 1% solution. So if you're not doing the lifestyle stuff, don't waste your time on the supplements. Do the lifestyle stuff and the supplements if you want to, but at least do the lifestyle stuff.
What about people who say are in the health industry, nurses? Is there any recommendation for should they or shouldn't they be visiting the elderly or like their parents?
That is well out of my area of expertise. What I will say about that is if you're a first responder or a healthcare worker, there's a really good chance you're running really high stress levels. There's a really good chance you're not getting ideal sleep. You might not be sleeping at the right time of day. You might not be getting enough sleep, any combination thereof. That would be my focus. I'd be making sure, again, that you're getting plenty of sleep. I'd be making sure that you're getting your activity. I'd be making sure that you're controlling your stress somehow. You're not living out of vending machines and off Diet Coke and coffee, because I've been in hospitals, I've worked in hospitals and trained in hospitals. I know what it's like.
There's a lot of different information about what people should or shouldn't be doing when it comes to groceries. So food safety, produce, getting food at the store or having it delivered. Are there anything people should be aware of?
So again, these are things we don't know. Not only do we not know, so first of all, I didn't say this earlier. I don't think I've done so many of these, I'm not sure at this point, but I don't think I said this earlier. A virus isn't alive or dead. I think it is. All it does is it gets inside and it causes itself to be replicated or whatever. So to say it's alive or to say it's dead is inaccurate. To say that it's viable or non-viable. So if a virus is laying on a surface and there's one virus there and it's on top of my desk right now, how long is that going to be viable that if that gets in me, I'm going to be infected by it? Well, that could be 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks. We don't know. We're getting close. It seems like it lasts for a long time. Let's just assume that it's everywhere. The other question is, how many do I need in me, right? So will one virus be killed by my immune system instantaneously and cause no infection? What about 1,000? What about 1,000,000? What about 1 billion? What about 1 trillion? These things are unbelievable, incomprehensibly small. You could very realistically get hundreds of thousands or millions of them all at once. So if somebody has the virus and they touch a package in the grocery store and then you touch that package immediately and you get that on your hand, your skin is protecting you. Don't wipe your face like I've been doing unless you've just washed your hands and you aren't touching anything else. All I've touched since I've been here is this piece of paper in my face. And that's simply because it's a little hot in here. I'm sweating. So use the wipes and wipe your cart down. Wash your hands. Be conscious of how much you're touching your face. Wear a mask if you're really concerned about it. Take the precautions that we know tend to work. If you're worried about what you should be touching and how long you should wait to touch it, or if there's some method to controlling this absolutely and guaranteeing that you're not going to be exposed to this, that doesn't exist. The guidance that we're being given by the CDC and by the policymakers, politicians, and so forth, like, that's the best guidance we have right now. Do those things, be responsible, and we'll see if they figure out a way for us to do more things. And it's not an either or. We could start putting certain people back to work and still doing everything that we're doing right now. There's going to be some balance struck of that. But all you can do right now is what the advice that you're getting. The advice that you're getting is to protect yourself. We talked about protecting yourself from the outside fears and even other outside infectious agents and other dangers. Like, you protect yourself from what's outside, and then you optimize your health through behaviors and nutrition to protect and idealize the inside of you, and that's your best chance. And no matter what we do, some people are going to get us, and you can do everything exactly and perfectly, and you still might get it. But the better your immune system is functioning, the healthier you are, the less likely it is to be super impactful on you, the less likely you are to be giving it to somebody else.
Right.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how this goes. If this is successful, if it, well, I'm not gonna put that kind of pressure on me. If this stimulates further questions, other comments, we could do a Q&A. I could do another one. I could answer specific questions. I could cover any topic that I just talked about in more detail. Every topic I just talked about, I could have spent an hour just on that. So I'm bouncing around trying to cover as much ground as possible. What about silver? Silver is great in nickels. No, nickels are nickel. Colloidal silver has been shown to be antibacterial, antiparasitic. I'm pretty sure it's antiviral. I don't know what the appropriate dosage is. I don't know how significant its effects are. Again, I would call that supplemental. As far as I know, that only works being ingested. Maybe it works on the hands. I don't know. But I would put that as a luxury, something nice to have if you're doing everything else. And if you want to try it, just be careful. I know some people have gotten themselves sick by using too much of it. All right, we're going to be gone for now. I hope this was impactful or helpful to at least one person. And if it wasn't, then I will just cry myself to sleep tonight. Tomorrow is my 50th birthday. I will be spending it alone in my house. And but I'm not planning on working or being on Facebook tomorrow, but maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday, well, I don't know. If anybody wants this, communicate through the website, my team will get it. And if anybody wants to do more, we can do more. For now, I will sign off, say good luck, be well, and sleep deeply, my friends. Should I leave this?
I got it.
Or Brett's gonna do it again.
Yeah, you can leave it though.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was. There, you want to leave?